Hey guys, it's Tiny Sim Builds here, and welcome to our first episode of The Sims 4 Real Lore. For this series, I will be covering different types of mysteries and different types of interesting supernatural paranormal stories, accompanied by a full-on Sims 4 build. And as you can tell from today's title, we are covering the story of Robert the Doll. So the house itself today is known as the Artist House, and our story takes place in the city of Key West in Florida, in the United States. Roughly our time period is in the 1900s, and we're looking at the life of the artist named Robert Eugene Otto. So the house that you are currently seeing right now was built on 534 Eaton Street and was built somewhere between 1890 and 1898. Now, for the Otto family, I was trying to do a little bit more research on them, but unfortunately not really much was known about them. But it is known that the family was pretty well known, pretty affluent, and they definitely had a good deal of money, considering their estate was pretty large. Now, Robert Eugene Otto at this time was approximately 8 years old, where the story of Robert the Doll would begin. Now, as a quick note, this story is definitely going to be a little bit on the spookier side, so if you are a little scared or feel a little heebie-jeebies about the supernatural or paranormal, please keep that in mind as you're watching. But anyways, for today's video, when I refer to Robert the Doll, I am of course referring to the doll himself, because Robert Eugene Otto, his owner, is also sharing the same name. But fortunately for us, Robert Eugene Otto was more widely known by his middle name Eugene, which I will be referring to in the video. So the origins of Robert the Doll are a little bit mysterious. There have been a little bit of back and forth, a little bit of debate on where he actually came from. Probably the more realistic origin story of Robert the Doll comes from his grandfather. His grandfather apparently traveled to Germany in 1904 and came back with Robert the Doll as a gift for the young Eugene. Now, supposedly this doll is made from the Steiff company, and upon doing a little bit of research, this company is actually still functioning today. From a lot of their current inventory, it does seem like they make a lot of stuffed animals, they make a lot of other toys and dolls for young children. And looking through a lot of the dolls that they had, especially with regards to their more vintage collection, Robert the Doll definitely seems like a doll that would come from their line. Now, with that said, there is also another theory regarding how Robert the Doll came to be. Supposedly, because the Otto family was so rich and affluent, and because their estate was so large, they did in fact have different servants and maids working within the household. Now, the origin of Robert the Doll could potentially come from a servant girl or woman who was growing very discontent, I would say, with her treatment in the household. Supposedly, the maid or servant was caught performing some kind of witchcraft by the family and was then fired upon this coming to light. Now, as a little bit of revenge, as you can say, or a little bit of a lashback, supposedly this doll was cursed, and the maid then gave the doll to the Otto family son, which is in fact Robert Eugene Otto, or in this video, simply known as Eugene. So there is definitely a little bit of inconsistency, a little bit of debate on what the truth really is. For me personally, I can definitely see this being a gift, given that this doll does line up with the doll seen from the Steiff company. But again, who really knows the truth? There's definitely a lot of different sides and different angles and perspectives when it comes to lore. But moving on to Robert the Doll himself. Now, the doll also has, again, more disputed facts or different perspectives on what he looks like. Obviously, we now know what he looks like today, given that he is in a museum, but we will get to that in a little bit. Originally, Robert the Doll, and specifically this doll from the Steiff company, was supposedly dressed in a harlequin outfit. And if you don't know what a harlequin outfit is, it is essentially a jester or clown of a more vintage variety, and that was his original outfit, supposedly. Now, however, as we know Robert the Doll today, Robert the Doll is seen wearing an old-fashioned sailor outfit. And this, I guess, would closely resemble that used by the US Navy. It is an all-white ensemble. But curiously enough, this outfit does in fact resemble an outfit seen on the young Eugene Otto himself. So it's possible that this outfit was custom made, perhaps maybe even replaced the Harlequin outfit. Again, there are a lot of mysteries to be unfolded here. But in terms of his appearance, he is quite a mysterious doll, I'll say that. He is quite creepy. He does have small black beady eyes. His material, his skin, is of a brown fabric. And to this day, he does have a lot of pores and different signs of wear throughout his body. But I don't really know if that's what he had when he was originally purchased. Now, the doll does hold onto a small teddy bear of sorts. Many people believe it to be like a small dog or stuffed animal of a dog. And alarmingly enough, this doll actually stands at 3 feet tall, so I am not an expert on children or child development, but that would probably put him about the size of a toddler, if I'm not mistaken. So quite an interesting doll indeed. Now, originally when the doll was gifted to Eugene, everything seemed to be fine. Whether it was from the servant, whether it was from his grandfather, there wasn't really anything happening until some time passes. Now, overall, Eugene was very attached to Robert. It is said that he brought this doll everywhere, and yes, he really didn't leave him out of his sight, if that makes any sense. But there are a lot of rumors and mysteries concerning some paranormal activity that starts happening with this doll. Now, apparently, Eugene would whisper into Robert's ear. It was definitely a common occurrence, and he would do so. But the things that would make, I don't know, I guess the things that would make you go a little bit more like, or ooh, you get those goosebumps, is the fact that upon several occasions, the parents of the young Eugene would hear Robert talking to the doll in his bedroom. And mysteriously enough, there would be another voice in the room. So they could tell it was a male voice, they could tell it was a voice that the young Eugene would not be able to emulate or throw his voice to create. And obviously, upon going upstairs, there was no one else in that bedroom space. So that is definitely where some of the creepy things start happening. Now, apart from this, there are some other signs that were glaringly creepy and suspicious. Reportedly, things would be missing throughout the house, or different belongings or different things would also be found broken throughout the estate. And for obvious reasons, the parents of Eugene would suspect it was him. They would suspect it was Eugene who, caused this mischief or caused such destruction throughout the house. But Eugene professed not, and he would say Robert did it. And Robert did it would be a reoccurring phrase said by the young Eugene. Obviously, his parents were kind of weary of that. They thought perhaps he could be lying. How could a doll do this thing? But yes, it was definitely getting more suspicious. Now, unfortunately for the family, things do escalate. And this, again, is part of lore. It's reported, so we can't say verbatim if this happened, but I will account what happened this one night. Apparently, Eugene was sleeping alone in his bedroom. His parents were obviously sleeping in their own master suite. And apparently, Eugene wakes up and sees Robert the doll staring at him. Robert the doll is in front of his bed staring at Eugene. Obviously, this is terrifying, and Eugene wakes up screaming. Now, naturally, his parents awaken. They're frazzled. They're in panic, wondering what's happening with their son. And they proceed to dash towards the door. By some unknown force, the door is actually locked, and they struggle to bust into the door, and meanwhile they can hear their son screaming, but there is also sounds of thrashing. There are sounds of furniture and objects being thrown about the room. Fortunately, they are able to push through the door and get inside, and lo and behold, they find their son. He is curled up, he is in terror. But lo and behold, here we have Robert the doll sitting calmly in front of the bed. Meanwhile, the room is in disarray. Like I said, furniture has been overturned, and the room is in absolute chaos. Now, even more unfortunate is the fact that these occurrences would actually continue. So perhaps maybe not to the same extent, but there would still be bouts of Robert the doll supposedly moving around, knocking things over, scaring the young Eugene. And like I said, this would be a reoccurring event. Now, obviously, this is a lot of activity happening in one house, and especially if you are a prominent family, you have guests over, you have servants over, it is without any surprise that this story, these events, would start spreading throughout the town. And fortunately or unfortunately for the people passing by, they would also become part of some of the paranormal activity surrounding Robert the doll. So with that said, there were a lot of reports of Robert seen moving in the window. He would switch positions. There were reports of even young children, young school children passing by and either trying to accost the doll, make conversation with it, or perhaps mock it and tease it, as children do. And apparently, Robert the doll would then retaliate, move, or change his expression. So again, more really creepy occurrences happening, and things also start developing in other ways. Now, after all this activity, there had to be something done about Robert the doll. So the family decided to place him in the attic for safekeeping. And unfortunately, this only helped the problem a little bit, as he is kind of shifted away from the main part of the household. But that did not stop his activity there. Reportedly, there were many servants that would apply and become current employees in the estate, but through either encountering the doll or being fearful of its energy, a lot of the servants would very quickly resign from their positions and leave. Now, for people visiting the household, there were continued reports of different eerie signs of Robert the doll. It was reported that they would hear small footsteps up in the attic, and also reports of giggling. Yes, giggling in the attic itself. So obviously, the activity was not stopping there. Now we then fast forward because we're looking at Eugene as a 8-year-old, but obviously many years have passed, and now he is approximately perhaps a young adult. He's probably going to college or university, and he decides to pursue a career in art. Now, interestingly, he actually leaves Robert behind. Robert is still in the attic, but he leaves to study art in both New York and Paris. Now, eventually, he does work as a painter. A lot of his work is mainly landscape and still life paintings, if you guys are familiar with those types of genres. And eerily enough, one could even argue that the presence of Robert the doll did in fact affect his artwork. Now, the Palm Coast newspaper states that the compositions were an uncomfortably funereal beauty due to the odd proportions and compositions of his works. So, yeah, I'll leave you guys with that. There's definitely something mysterious in Eugene Otto's work. Perhaps influenced by Robert the doll, but I'll let you guys debate that. But anyways, apart from that, he did become quite an artist. He does have some works reportedly featured in the Key West Library. So, to be honest with you guys, it was a little bit hard finding his artwork. I don't think he has a very robust collection. Either that or it's not very highly publicized. But he does have artwork that does exist. And I have found a little bit. I think it is fairly well done, but ultimately I'll let you guys be the judge. Anyway, circling back to his personal life, I believe that while he is studying in France, he does meet his future wife, a woman named Annette, who would then become Annette Otto. The two marry in Paris, and upon marrying, this is where things start going back towards Robert the doll. Eventually, I don't really know what happens to Eugene's parents, but I assume that they either move away or they have become deceased. But anyways, Eugene and his wife Annette move back to his childhood home, where Robert the doll is situated. And from what I read, Eugene seemed to kind of rediscover Robert. He goes back up to the attic. He unearths Robert. Robert is obviously still intact. He's still there. And I believe he tries moving him into their master bedroom. Now, naturally, his wife Annette starts feeling very uneasy around the doll. She can't really pinpoint why, but she gets a very uncomfortable feeling. And I think for some period of time, she tries to make do with Robert the doll being back in their life. Now, As a general detail, I do believe the couple still has some servants working in the house, but I don't believe they start a family of their own for whatever reason. But anyways, obviously with Robert the doll back out, things start getting creepy once more. After Annette starts getting very uncomfortable with the doll, she most likely convinces Eugene to place him back in the attic. And obviously Robert the doll, upon getting, back into his owner's life, is not too happy with that fact. So apparently they would try to relocate him in the attic. They would proceed to lock the door to the attic in hopes that Robert and any of his mysterious activity would remain there. But unfortunately for the couple, again, by some unknown unearthly force, Robert the doll has managed to get out of his attic, his entrapped space, and he's back in the bedroom itself. Again, this would keep happening, and reportedly at some point, Eugene Otto would then design a custom turret room, I guess you could say, in order to house Robert the doll. Now this turret is seen in this build. You'll actually see it at the very end, and it essentially is a tower. It is a tower featured on the front part of the building, and that is where Robert is housed. Reportedly, Eugene Otto did create smaller furniture for Robert the doll, so there are toys, there is a small bed, and I did want to emulate that in the build as well. Now, unfortunately, years later, Robert starts falling ill, or I should say Eugene. Eugene, his owner, starts falling ill, and this occurs in the early 1970s. I don't really know per se what his illness was, but unfortunately, Eugene passed in 1974, leaving Annette, his wife, now a widow. Now, reportedly, in the last 3 years leading up to Eugene's death, it is said that Eugene spent a lot of time talking with Robert the doll. He would be there alone in the turret or tower portion of the estate for many long periods at a time. Unfortunately, Annette then passes away a few years later, unfortunately falling ill as well. I don't really remember what her disease or illness was, but upon her passing, she actually stated to whoever the future owner would be that the attic would be left intact with Robert the doll locked away inside that chest. Now, there are many different owners that the doll passes between, but ultimately we fast forward, and a woman by the name of Myrtle Reuter ends up purchasing the house along with Robert. She owns the house for 20 years, and through her time with discovering Robert and all of his shenanigans, his activity, she can in fact confirm that the rumors are true. She has experienced him moving on his own. She has experienced him changing facial expressions, especially if there are guests in the house and they talk in a disapproving manner towards him. And obviously, after all that time, I think she was ready to close this chapter. She sold Robert the doll to the museum located in Key West, known as the Fort East Martello Museum. So that is where Robert the doll stands today. He is currently encased in a glass display, if you can call it that. And you can in fact see this haunted doll if you wish. But I do warn you, there are many reports of people who have been unable to take pictures of Robert. Supposedly you have to ask his permission. Otherwise, your camera or phone will not work. Alright guys, and that is a wrap on the story of Robert the doll and the artist house as it is known today. Now, as a final closing thought on this whole story, I just wanted to let you guys know that this estate is now an actual hotel. So if you do want to in fact live in the same estate where Eugene lived and experienced all these creepy happenings with Robert the doll, you can in fact do so in Key West. It's a super interesting transition and was definitely the main inspiration behind a lot of the design choices in the house, but of course I merged a lot of older, more vintage Victorian looks for a lot of the interior and exterior as well. Now, just like always, this build will be available in the Sims 4 gallery. This is a limited pack build, and I will be showing the lot specs, just like always, along with some really nice cinematics so you guys can get a full picture on how everything turned out. As always, you know I love hearing all your thoughts and feedback in the comments, and definitely let me know if you enjoyed the storytime element and or the full speed build as well. And with that, this has been Townie Sim Builds, signing off. Thank you so much for watching, guys.